Wesizwe, we are not in a position to tell the names, mention the names, because there are still disciplinary processes or the processes that are beyond appeal processes, disciplinary processes that are beyond the process itself of expulsion, which is the appeal processes. So we cannot then divulge their names in this briefing. Thank you very much for now, Comrade Luther. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the response. The SG will come and give other responses, and the convener of the Women's League will follow immediately after.
No, thank you very much, DSG, and thanks for all the questions that we raised here. The DSG was able to clarify some of the issues that were raised. There is a question on why do we announce the leadership structures separately? Why can't we do it all at once? So prior to the national officials identifying and processing and thereafter appointing leadership, there's a very intense organic process that involves the lower structures of the organization, assessment of the work done before, but also assessment of the different capacities of the individuals that get to be identified. There's a broad criteria that we have that takes into consideration the issue of gender balance, geographic spread, skills, also the ability to lead politically in terms of the responsibilities that are expected. So there's a very intense process which we subject the leadership selection process prior to us announcing. And we do so because we do not want to rush into appointment of structures which we have not satisfied ourselves that these are capable structures. And remember that the mandate that these structures that we're putting in place, it's not temporary structures. These are detachments that are going to lead Umkhonto Wesizwe and regional, provincial level to the victory in the 2026 local government elections, but also to 2029 general elections. So that process can be done in a speedy, haphazard way, in a manner that is expected. So we engage in thorough process of how we identify leadership. We're saying earlier to the leadership that is designated for Northwest and Free State Province that despite our commitment that they are mandated to lead the program towards 2026 and 2029, if there is internal divisions amongst them, we're going to discontinue such a structure. If there is infights and factionalism and all of these things, we're going to have to discontinue the structure or isolate the people who are involved in factionalism. If there's one thing we're going to decisively nip in the bud, it's factionalism and gatekeeping. Those are the demons that we're not going to tolerate in Umkhonto Wesizwe, and we'll deal with much more decisively, without any fear, without any tiptoeing around anyone in terms of how such is handled. Now, can I have the copies of the constitutions there? On the 26th of September, we adopted the constitution of Umkhonto Wesizwe, 26 September 2026. So we've got the different versions in all languages. So in the Zulu version says, Umthetho Sisekelo weqembu lomkhonto wesizwe. Adopted on the 26th of September 2024. And at the same meeting, we adopted the code of conduct. We also adopted something we call the minimum standards, guidelines, and code of conduct for all public representatives. Since the adoption of the Constitution, the minimum standards, and the code of conduct, there has never been an amendment of the MK Constitution. So in the minimum standards, there is a clause which is standard for all organizations that are self-respecting, that on issues that relate to MK or governance, if you are deployed in the legislature, if you are deployed in National Assembly or National Council of Provinces, if there's an issue that you want to raise before you reach the president, please raise that issue in the internal structures. Raise it in the caucus. If the caucus does not give you a hearing, raise it with the officials in the province where you come from. If it's not handled properly, then approach the other officials at national level. Instead of you taking a bus from Limpopo and you go to Kwadagwad News to want to meet the president about an issue which, if you had raised with the leadership of the province, it could have been resolved. And that is the character of all self-respecting organizations, that let's have Umkhonto Wesizwe as an organization that exists and is able to deal with all its issues everywhere it finds itself. So the culture or subculture, sometimes it's done with good intentions, but sometimes it's also done with bad intentions, where people say, no, we're just visiting the president, we just want to say thank you to the president, we're just going to introduce ourselves. And when they are there, they are talking about internal dynamics and politics of Umkhonto Wesizwe. And the leadership that they are talking about or complaining about or raising concerns about is not immediately there. And the president does not close his doors. All of us know, all of you know as members of Umkhonto Wesizwe, that the president welcomes everyone who comes to him. Like literally everyone. If you go to Nkandla, you go to wherever he will be, he is open to everyone. But we are then saying that as a matter of proper record and proper conduct of the organization, if you want to raise organizational issues or issues that relate to governance, raise it in the relevant structures instead of you going to raise it there. Because one issue which we have to deal with, it's a situation where even when the comrades who go to visit the president have not raised any issue with him, they will ask for a photo with the president. And then when they go back to the ground and they go back to the legislature, they harass people with that photo. That I was with the president here, the president said, Ubaba Ute. That is what we are dealing with much more decisively, to protect the character of the organization, which is able to deal with its own issues. There are disciplinary issues that we have taken in relation to Mpumalanga. We've mentioned that, but the DSG is correct that because those that have been subjected to the disciplinary process or decisions have been taken against them still have the leeway or the permissibility to appeal, we can't be publicizing their names. It will not be fair on them, because everywhere they go, they're going to be treated that this is an expelled member, this is an expelled member. We just are explaining the simple fact that we have taken a decision to expel members. They must exhaust internal process. And once they're out of the organization, we will explain even the offenses that they committed. There's a challenge in Mpumalanga, objectively so. And we have met with the leadership that is led by the convener of Mpumalanga, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. The convener of Mpumalanga is Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, as per the decision of the national officials of the National High Command of the President. So that is the convener of Mpumalanga. We are aware that there are people who are not pleased with the composition of the leadership in Mpumalanga. Such is the case as well in Limpopo. That is why we gave an indication here that the leadership, the national officials, will go to the province to listen to each and every member of Umkhonto Wesizwe as to what are the basis of their concerns, so that we can resolve all these issues and then we end up with one organization. We will not close our eyes and ears whenever concerns are raised in the organization, even if we suspect that some of the issues that are raised border on opportunism. We will always go and listen to all members of Umkhonto Wesizwe so that we produce one organization and not multiple organizations. But also we want to caution the comrades that are raising legitimate concerns about the leadership, that don't, in the process of raising concerns, find yourself on the other side of the constitution and violating it. There is no one who is closed out. When you are not appointed as leadership, don't say that I am the leader, I will not change. There is no leadership structure in Umkhonto Wesizwe which was appointed without the concurrence of the president. All the leadership structures, including the ones we're announcing here, of the leagues and the fraternal organizations, the president was in those meetings, and we go name by name so that we collectively take responsibility. To now want to attribute the leadership outcomes and collectives to one leader of Umkhonto Wesizwe is opportunism, is problematic. But also, if you want to bring information which perhaps the entire leadership collective was not aware of when it was making such an appointment, do so in a disciplined way. Do so in a disciplined manner. Don't go and organize parallel programs and want to demonstrate that you are more relevant than the leadership that has been identified. We know as the collective as to what we're doing in all the provinces and the regions. We're not making mistakes. But if there are issues that were beyond our comprehension, when we make appointments, bring to our attention, we listen to you. Hence, the national chairperson will be going to Limpopo with the national organizer and the head of presidency to listen to the concerns that are raised there. In Mpumalanga, the national officials will be going to listen to whoever is raising a concern. We did say this to the detachment, the top 8, the convener, Advocate Mkwebana, the deputy convener is Masumbuka, the coordinator is Mkatra, and all the leaders that have been appointed. Those are leaders in Mpumalanga. Even when we go to have consultations in Mpumalanga, we take that decision stands, but we are willing to listen to other perspectives and inputs from members so that ultimately we all get to own up to this. So, in the democratic centralism that is outlined in the constitution of Umkhonto Wesizwe says that there will be democratic consultations before decisions are taken. That is what the constitution of Umkhonto Wesizwe says, that there will be democratic consultations and engagements before decisions are taken. But once decisions have been taken, the right to disagree, the right to differ dwindles into insignificance. It doesn't matter anymore. We can't consult forever. At some stage, we must have to take decisions in terms of how we move forward. The issue that is raised by Natasha from SABC on free education, it's a historical fact that will go into proper historical context, that when there was Fees Must Fall movement, Bongikosi Kanyile is here, was part of the Fees Must Fall movement. First, the reaction of government under President Zuma was to put in place a commission of inquiry to investigate methods of how we can introduce, or South Africa can introduce, fee-free education at higher education level. And that commission did not recommend that there must be fee-free education at higher education level. It recommended some mixed masala of combinations of student loans and banks involvement and all of those things there. But President Zuma rejected that report and announced that there must be free quality education for all at higher education level. That was the decision that was taken. And of course, after he left office, those who came after him frustrated the full rollout of free education for all at post-secondary level. But politically, President Zuma had given a directive in terms of introduction of free education for all. And that is on record. And by the way, if you were to go and check the many articulations which even the sponsored disruptions which some of us were associated with in the past, even the sponsored, you must go and listen to all his interventions on the land question. In Parliament, he emphatically said that why is it that there's a debate amongst black political parties on the expropriation of land without compensation? But blinded by whatever issue, there was no follow-up on that to the fullest. And the caucus of the ruling party then, the majority party, frustrated such a realization. There was consensus, I know this because we're at the forefront of that before. There was consensus on amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution because President Zuma had given a clear indication that that should be the case. But when political power shifted hands to the one who is in office now, such was frustrated to the extent that the 2/3 that existed between the former liberation movement and the organization that characterizes itself as an economic emancipation movement was no longer existing. And the opportunity was lost in terms of the politics of real transformation in South Africa. The immediate issues that confront higher education in South Africa is an obvious historical issue of one, the spaces that are available for first year uptake are far much lesser than the number of students that are produced at secondary levels. So the entire system of matriculants and those who drop out at grade 10 and 11 at any given point exceeds 1 million. But if you were to go and quantify just how many spaces are available in universities of technology, and TVET colleges, it's far much lesser. So you end up having a category which Statistics South Africa always categorizes as the not in employment and not in educational training institutions. It's a very huge number of the unemployed that constitute a huge number of unemployed poor South Africans, young South Africans who do not have access to education, do not have access to any job in terms of how such is constructed. So there has to be, yes, qualitative expansion of the higher education sector, but there must be quantitative expansion of the higher education sector. That is one of the most important issues that Wits University, University of Pretoria, University of Johannesburg, University of Cape Town, University of Western Cape, University of Venda, University of Limpopo, all campuses, Tshwane University of Technology, all of these universities must be given a political directive also coupled with funding to expand the number of people that they must take into education and training on a constant basis. We need to train as many people as possible in whatever skill so that when we create industry, we're able to absorb them into quality sustainable jobs. The other issue which is long overdue is the issue of the historic debt. So we said as part of the contributions in the State of Nation address that Umkhonto Wesizwe will initiate or support all legislation that seeks to cancel historical debts of students. How do you deny someone a paper that says you have got a degree or a diploma or a certificate because they owe you money that they cannot pay you? It's not that they are just defying to pay you as a university. They don't have the money. You have got means as government to establish that these people do not have money. They've been here, and some of the amounts which universities are holding certificates for, it's far much lesser amounts. You find someone is only owing a university 2,500, 5,000 rand, and then they hold the whole degree of a person because you owe a university 5,000 rand. Where is the political morality? Where is the political consciousness and conscience to just let go? Let's give students their degrees. Everyone who has passed must be given their degrees. We can find a way of how do they repay it if it's needed. There's not even a need because there is no way that you can continue to hound the people of who are owing universities on the basis that they must pay you. They can't pay you. They don't have the money. They've demonstrated that they do not have the money. So that is an issue that must be attended to in terms of how we deal with these issues. I think the DSG has dealt with the issues of disciplinary issues and everything else. But now myself, as a Secretary General, as a person, I don't get offended by anything. I know that leadership responsibility will always come with all sorts of accusations and all sorts of insults, sometimes of unfair judgments or gauge. And I took this responsibility fully aware that such will be part of the responsibilities that were given. There are so many things that are said, like, and we just watch, and of course, I also don't respond to things that are said on social media. There are so many obvious lies that are told about us, but we just leave it because lies will always expose themselves in terms of how we characterize these issues. So I personally don't get offended by anyone, and I don't hold any grudges against anyone. Like, MK is a very huge movement. It's attracting leaders from different formations. There are people whom we could have had differences with before. But when they come to Umkhonto Wesizwe and then they need to be guided, we have to guide all of them objectively and fairly. That is what leadership responsibilities require of us, an obligation. And that is what, we must say this, that is what we learn from President Zuma. Some of us historically said all sorts of things about President Zuma, but he embraces us and even gives us very serious responsibilities with full confidence. So who would we be representing if we are leading Umkhonto Wesizwe and then we hold grudges and then want to fight people? Which organization are we leading if our character is to be insulting people and insulting back? Where have you seen President Zuma insult anyone? Where have you seen President Zuma denigrate anyone? Nowhere. But you can go and check. There's so many things that were said about him, including someone who was gossiping somewhere. We don't know whether that is true. Someone was saying that when President Zuma was 17 years old, he was possibly a collaborator. And these are certified collaborators who, even when they were leading the country, you could see by their direction, their association with the imperialist and colonialist West, that they are representing the interest of the establishment. And then they tend that, no, when 70 years ago or 68 years ago, when you were 17 years old, how did you get arrested? The measure of President Zuma must be gauged about what he gets to contribute now, what he contributed. He has never collaborated with the establishment domestically and globally. That is why when he was head of state and president, he got to take South Africa to join an organization which was called BRIC. It became BRICS, associated with the global south and progressive countries in the world. And that is the legacy that we're going to defend and will continue to defend as Umkhonto Wesizwe. My boy Africa.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Commander Shivambu. I'm not going to give the members of the media some of these intelligent responses to questions, because I think for us as women also is about really creating our own space and being ourselves and not really trying to be anyone. And the first question that came is from a female that is in the media space with a clear understanding of how difficult it is for women in these spaces. And the question was, what is different about the Women's League in Umkhonto Wesizwe? And I think one of the first things that you can look at is how different this table looks today. than it has ever been, maybe. And us being a 1 year old and a few months old, I think it is quite important. It communicates a message that there must be change, that women have got to be seen in these spaces of leadership. And I think that's something that you should look at and congratulate us on it. And we've said that this is just the start. We have showed only 4 of the leaders in Gauteng detachment that have been announced. And we said that there's going to be more. But when we talk about why this is important, we can never get enough of these organizations that look after the interests of women. Women are at the forefront of placing political parties and leaders where they are in this country, but we hardly see them really coming up in positions of power and being able to really develop policies that will position women better in this country. And for us as Umkhonto Wesizwe, it's one of the important things that we wanted to correct. Of course, one of the other challenges is that, and most of you have called us a stokvel, was to create solid structures. And that is what is different about this. It's about creating a solid structure for the Women's League that will actually represent the party and South Africa at large. So no intelligent conversations, but really practical things that we have to do. And the second question that came, I don't know if I will remember all of them. Somebody was asking about the policies and really going deep there. We are still at the beginning, guys. Please give us a chance. What we know is that the MK Women's League is a relatively autonomous structure. In terms of the MK party, we say we're advocating for policies that ensure sustainable development, security and prosperity for South Africans. And that is formulated within the party. And it will be the same. You know, those policies are going to transfer to women. And I'm sure some of you in the media have seen some of the statements that we are beginning to put out, even though at the moment it's only myself and my colleague in the national office, and we are trying to grow our base. We've said that we are at the initial stages of drafting our constitution, policy documents, etc. And I'm sure that when we get to it, we'll engage at a deeper level. But from a reality point of view, we're very passionate about issues that affect women, our children, our people with disabilities, and we want to show that in terms of everything that we do, we will put women at the center of it, you know, whether it's political issues, economic issues, etc. We'll always ensure that women find themselves at the center of it, and women are positioned the way they are supposed to be positioned on every issue. I'm trying to just sum up these things, and I'm hoping that I've covered as much as I could. I'm just surprised that you guys are not asking questions to the Youth League here. Thank you.
Kwaza Umkhonto, Kwaza. Thank you very much, SG. But for now, we're still trying to make sure that the Youth League at a provincial level, there are structures, because there are many pressing matters affecting young people across the country. Currently, NSFAS is not doing what it should be doing. Young people are throwing out their campuses, their races. Also, SG, what we're trying to
what we are currently busy with right now, in terms of universities, when they take applications, they take beyond what they can accept. By that, you pay for the application. And when they reject your application, they don't give you back your money. So those are the issues that we are currently facing as young people. But in due course, we will be calling the media and outlining our program of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the responses, very clear responses. We promise that we'll take the second round of hands, but I know that the answers answered even many other questions. So in case there is a minor miss, we'll allow that opportunity. Let me just recognize all the hands first before you start. It's hand number 1, hand number 2. So we've got 2 hands. Oh, 3. All right. Yeah, it will be a clear last round. You can start there. Oh, you changed the seats. Okay.
Is it okay?
Can I just shout? I think I'm ready.
Okay. Oh.
Thank you. I just want to get your reaction. I think you're aware of the emergency cabinet meeting that took place or that is currently underway today about the cabinet. Perhaps as the MK party, what inputs have you made? Or have you engaged GNU or the president on your budget proposals? And perhaps as the MK party, what are your proposals on government getting that or making that 60 billion rand shortfall? Also, as a progressive caucus in parliament, you, the EFF, and those 2 other parties, have you actually engaged on this issue? And yeah, just what your expectations are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 2.
No, thank you very much. I'm Lunga from the Mail and Guardian again. I do not think I got satisfaction on the issue of Mzwanele Manyi and the Deputy President as to whether that speech was indeed sanctioned by the President, and if not, have any disciplinary processes been taken? And also, in the reply of the DSG, she said that every single process needs to be sent to the Secretary General. Considering that he is conflicted in the issue of Duduzile, would there not be any other person that can take over that process instead of the SG himself handling that matter? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, the last hand here.
Thank you. I'm Khawelo Magoleo from UFM. I'm taking you back to Mpumalanga. Mary Padu. My recollection is that she went to court to challenge her expulsion from MK, and she won. And my understanding is that the law of the land would then supersede that of the organization. And there's no record of MK approaching the court to reverse that decision. So I just want to find out factually, currently, what is her status? Were you able to stop the legislature from continuing to pay her a salary? Is Mem Kwebane being paid a salary from the legislature or from MK? Because as I recall, she was a direct replacement of Mary Padu in the legislature. And SG, with this approach of officials visiting Mpumalanga, is she among the people that you are going to be talking to, particularly considering the crowd that she pulled when she had a rival, a competing rally rather, recently? And back to national issues, the issue of Duduzile. I'm afraid it's not enough to address us in global terms and say everyone is subjected to discipline in MK, because this is not everyone. This is a daughter of the supreme leader of the party. So there's already a perception, even among your members who express themselves freely on social media and in the mainstream, that she's being protected. So the question is every member who finds themselves in the wrong going to be afforded this luxury of having their conduct discussed at the highest level, as the DSG puts it, to get the wisdom of President Zuma, whether on how to move? Is it not, are you able to agree that if she's seen to be getting away with this or getting a slap on the wrist, it may set a precedent that you may not be able to sustain in terms of discipline? And Mr. Chibambo, you know, people, especially your former party, they seem to be blaming you for the action that they've taken against their member, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. And I see you continue to post him. Was there at any stage where there was promise of him coming to MK? And do you feel some responsibility each time you post him, praising him as a leader, and then there's a retaliation from the other side? Every week. Twitter. Yeah, I'll show you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was the last hand, and I'll be guided by the SG, whether it's the DSG first, yes, and then in that sequence. Thank you very much, TSG.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to make this clear. Duduzile Zuma Sambudla is indeed a daughter of the president of Umkhonto Wesizwe. But in the Umkhonto Wesizwe, she is the member. She is the member of Umkhonto Wesizwe, like all of us. She joined Umkhonto Wesizwe. She signed the declaration. So within Umkhonto Wesizwe, Duduzile Zuma is a member of Umkhonto Wesizwe. I want to reiterate what I had said, that the constitution is clear that any member, and that includes everyone who is the member of Umkhonto Wesizwe, should you behave out of the stipulations of the constitution, then disciplinary processes, you must be subjected to disciplinary processes. In respect of the matter having to be discussed at the national officials meeting, we embrace the opportunity of being in the presence of the president, and we take that opportunity as an exclusive opportunity, because that is where we gather wisdom from the president of Umkhonto Wesizwe. It was not because it is an exclusive and a special matter. All the matters that the SG has communicated today were indeed discussed in that meeting, to get the concurrence, to get the ratification, and also to get the words of wisdom and guidance from the president. That is the first one. The second one being that, but it is on Duduzile. The second one was, no, I'm here to respond on the matter that was directed to DSG, and I am the DSG of Umkhonto Wesizwe. I have responded to that question.
Okay, I think you have responded very clear. SG, if you can come. Yes.
Conflict of interest. I'm sorry, now I remember. In respect of the conflict of interest, the Constitution is clear that the report on misconduct must be submitted not to the Secretary General, to the Secretary General's office. I resort in that office as the DSG. So there is no conflict of interest or whatever. I resort in that office as GO. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, DSG. So the agenda and contents of what we're going to discuss with structures in Mpumalanga will be shared with structures in Mpumalanga. It's an internal meeting, but the aim of such engagements with structures is to acknowledge the fact that there are comrades who are organizing in different platforms. Those who are associated with the former coordinator, Mike Ngobeni, those who are associated with the former convener, Mary Paddy. And we want to have one organization in Mpumalanga. So the engagements will be aimed at resolving that unnecessary parallelism that is existing in the province. And we'll do that in a much more matured political way that will persuade everyone that we should have one organization under one leadership. The details of what is going to happen there will belong to those meetings. I honestly don't think we should subject press conferences of Umkhonto Wesizwe to my views on Mwiseni and what and all of this. He correctly has resigned from the EFF, but I don't want to talk about that. It's not an issue which we can subject a press conference of Umkhonto Wesizwe to. We can respond though to an issue which is raised on what is to be done now that there is a stalemate on the revenue shortfalls, that the South African Revenue Services has not been able to optimally collect revenue that is adequate to fund the medium-term expenditure or development program. It used to be called medium-term expenditure framework, but now it's called development plans. So what we have is a revenue services and a state that is unable to optimally collect enough money to meet its obligations. And because they have failed to do so, they then now want to take more money from poor people from the value-added tax. And that becomes the resolution and the proposal of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, because that is what he did when he came into office. The first thing which he did as the head of state and president in 2018 was to increase VAT from 14% to 15%. There had never been an increase of VAT in South Africa for possibly more than 30 years, since the democratic dispensation. We actually had thought it as natural that VAT is 14%. We're taking that 14% is VAT. So actually, the VAT was a synonym of 14%. And then Mr. Ramaphosa came and then he took advantage of that period of excitement and all of those things that came with him, and then he introduced a measure which impoverish poor people, which make poor people to pay more for the basic services, which in any way have been rising in terms of cost as compared to the rising salary levels. So the actions of Mr. Ramaphosa are impoverishing poor people, is to get black people in general and Africans in particular poorer. And now there's a revenue shortfall. He wants to take advantage again and wants to make the lives of our people worse. Rich people will not feel the pain of VAT increases because they're not price sensitive. So majority of rich, mostly white people, they don't even know what is the price of bread. They don't know what is the price of anything. They pay any amount, whatever is the price, but poor people, they calculate each and every cent as to what do we expend money on for food, for transport, for this. So if you increase the VAT, it means there are so many basic services which our people will not be able to afford because there is now an increase on the value added tax. There's multiple options. I do not know that why, despite there's so many rhetorical commitments, why are we continuing to have the funding model on infrastructure like we do currently? Because instead of allocating the budget directly or fiscal commitments to infrastructure, why are we not pursuing the build, operate, transfer model and work with our friends from the People's Republic of China, from Russia, from India to build the mega infrastructure that we need on a build, operate, transfer model, instead of priding ourselves that we're just going to throw in resources which otherwise were going to be redirected for basic services and needs. That is one. But two, I think there's an issue which has not been resolved, which was raised even in different platforms on, for a government to be able to collect revenue, there must be a base upon which it collects revenue from. That is the economy. And if that base is eroded, the tax base is eroded in terms of its activities, the revenue that the state collects will be far much lesser. And how does the tax base of South Africa gets eroded? It gets eroded through transfer pricing and illicit financial flows, where the major multinational corporations, they do not pay the taxes that are due to South Africa because they engaged in practices and the maladies of transfer pricing. So if you were to check now the revenue projections, where the shortfalls came from, they came from mostly the mining sector, because almost all the companies that are involved in the mining sector are involved in transfer pricing. So the revenue shortfall came from corporate income tax, mostly in the mining sector, because they somehow manipulate the numbers and they bloat their expenses to the extent that they do not declare any profit. If they did not declare any profit, it means they cannot be taxed. And then South Africa ends up losing a lot of potential revenue. And that is what you need, that if this government of South Africa was not an executive that is managing the common affairs of the ruling class or the bourgeoisie, it would take decisive action on optimal revenue collection in terms of what is expected. That is one category of what can be dealt with. So as part of the legislations and the bills that a Minister of Finance was going to introduce in the budget speech was something called the Eskom Relief Bill, which was going to take, I think, upward of 150 billion rands to Eskom as part of the immediate interventions. But there are so many leakages in terms of revenue collection that is supposed to be collected and is due to Eskom, because municipalities do not pay Eskom, but Eskom itself as well doesn't have efficient systems to optimally collect the revenue that it is supposed to collect so that it can be self-sustainable as a utility. So part of the interventions that have to be made now is to stabilize the revenue collection streams of Eskom. How do you optimally collect revenue for Eskom so that you do not pass an Eskom relief legislation which is going to appropriate a significant amount of money from the state into Eskom activities? So there's multiple interventions that can be made in the immediate to resolve the current revenue shortfalls that are now being shifted to the pockets of poor people. And we only need a decisive, clear government that is going to be able to do so. But the fact of the matter is that this so-called government of national unity is a committee of the white capitalists. They are deployees of the white. It was created by the white capitalists. It serves their interest. So they can't do anything that touches the establishment. They rather go and impoverish poor people. They won't touch the establishment because they are scared of their handlers in terms of how the economy and politics in South Africa are shaped. So there has to be decisive action on the owners of money, of those who own huge capital, to get to maximize revenue from their end, not from poor people, but also to make a government much more efficient in revenue collection from the municipality, provincial, and national level, so that we arrest all these leakages. And a different model on how we fund our infrastructure, which will be fiscally neutral, but will still be able to achieve the developmental objectives and agenda that we need. That is basically what a responsible government would consider. But they are possibly going to box each other and end up at 16% instead of 17%, which as Umkhonto Wesizwe, we must still reject with contempt, because we cannot continue to impoverish our people. Of course, we must expand the basket, which is VAT-free, but we must also reject the increase of VAT on all the basic goods and services as is planned. And thank you very much. I think we have covered all the issues that we're supposed to cover with dealing with appointment of leadership of structures, and we will be indicating as to when we are appointing the structures of Eastern, Northern, and Western Capes at the provinces, and then we finalize the other structures. But in terms of the program of action that was adopted by the national officials, by the end of March, all the provincial structures must be in place and fully functioning, and all the fraternal organizations should be having solid and stable leadership structures. And that is exactly what we're going to achieve as a movement, an organization, a liberation movement that understands that you can't just gain political power and you think that you have gained total emancipation. You need to fight for total emancipation, which is political, economic, social, cultural, hegemonic, every form of freedom. That is what Umkhonto Wesizwe is fighting for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I also saw a rumor that even the Commission of SARS doesn't agree with this 3%. Maybe next time you must direct that question to him. I'll be very interested to know why he doesn't agree. Thank you very much for making time to this very important session. And we do not take your commitment and time for granted. We really appreciate the relationship that we have with yourselves. And on that basis, on behalf of the national officials and the broader leadership of MK Party, the session is adjourned. Thank you very much.
The DSG was able to clarify some of the issues that were raised. There is a question on why do we announce the leadership structures separately? Why can't we do it all at once? So prior to the national officials identifying and processing and thereafter appointing leadership, there's a very intense organic process that involves the lower structures of the organization, assessment of the work done before, but also assessment of the different capacities of the individuals that get to be identified. There's a broad criteria that we have that takes into consideration the issue of gender balance, geographic spread, skills, also the ability to lead politically in terms of the responsibilities that are expected. So there's a very intense process which we subject the leadership selection process prior to us announcing. And we do so because we do not want to rush into appointment of structures which we have not satisfied ourselves that these are capable structures. And remember that the mandate that these structures that we're putting in place It's not temporary structures. These are detachments that are going to lead Umkhonto, Wesizwe and regional, provincial level to the victory in the 2026 local government elections, but also to 2029 general elections. So that process can be done in a speedy, haphazard way, in a manner that is expected. So we engage in thorough process of how we identify leadership. We're saying earlier to the leadership that is designated for Northwest and Free State Province that despite our commitment that they are mandated to lead the program towards 2026 and 2029, if there is internal divisions amongst them, we're going to discontinue such a structure. If there is infights and factionalism and all of these things, we're going to have to discontinue the structure or isolate the people who are involved in factionalism. If there's one thing we're going to decisively nip in the bud, it's factionalism and gatekeeping. Those are the demons that we're not going to tolerate in Umkhonto Wesizwe, and will deal with much more decisively, without any fear, without any tiptoeing around anyone in terms of how such is handled. Now, can I have the copies of the constitutions there? On the 26th of September, we adopted the constitution of Umkhonto Wesizwe, 26 September 2026. So we've got the different versions in all languages. So in the Zulu version says, Umthetho Sisekelo weqembu lomkhonto wesizwe, adopted on the 26th of September 2024. And at the same meeting, we adopted the code of conduct. We also adopted something we call the minimum standards, guidelines, and code of conduct for all public representatives. Since the adoption of the constitution, the minimum standards, and the code of conduct, there has never been an amendment of the MK constitution. So in the minimum standards, there is a clause which is standard for all organizations that are self-respecting, that on issues that relate to MK or governance, if you are deployed in the legislature, if you are deployed in National Assembly or National Council of Provinces, if there's an issue that you want to raise before you reach the president, please raise that issue in the internal structures. Raise it in the caucus. If the caucus does not give you a hearing, raise it with the officials in the province where you come from. If it's not handled